fact of the matter is, the people are sheep. They follow the leader, and the leader means dollar bill. And in this geopolitical left, right, all of that,
well, it's sort of a condescending attitude. I mean, that's really the attitude of the American elites, that all they have to do is create this narrative, and then people will go along with it. And they do for a while.
No, politics is a game. I mean, it's like Monopoly. How can it be real?
We don't necessarily agree with Don. In fact, we're sure there are some examples of people who didn't blindly follow their leaders. We're sure of it. That's not it. This must be better, right? Much better. At least they have nice hair. What qualities make a good leader?
In this day and age, right now, I think they need a little bit more, they need to be more humble.
I like someone to be more, like say, out front and stuff like that. It's what I would consider a layman's type person.
Making sure that there's a lot of transparency, which is a great buzzword right now.
A person that has charisma and is, a great speaker and someone that actually cares about people.
Jorge used to be a leader himself, a shepherd, and then a general in this country. Now he stays out of politics.
I think the qualities one looks for is do what you said you'd do, and that the platform on what you were elected on.
Transparency in a nutshell.
They should think about the country, the people, not themselves.
So if you're going to be a true leader, you have to give up yourself. You can't worry about the big fancy cars, lifetime jobs, all of that. A real leader's going to get killed, frankly put. Anybody that's for the masses is going to die.
Honesty and a good plan. If you're dishonest, life will take care of you. You don't need to be out there, Life takes care of people that do right, like takes care of people that do wrong.
We know the qualities of a good leader. So why are we still following the bad ones? We found a list of the 10 most corrupt leaders in the world. Who would be on that list?
Wow, 10, that's a lot.
I can name the countries, but not necessarily the people.
I know that there are a lot of issues in South and Central America.
I'm not aware of the list, but I'm sure the Philippines is one of them.
This should have been something that I nailed, but apparently I'm too involved in work these days to be paying attention to world affairs.
I want to say I don't know exactly which country, but it's in Africa, and it's the president's been the same president forever.
What if we ask some experts?
Marcos and Lazarenko, of course.
Mr. Abacha from Nigeria is on the list, Suharto from Indonesia, and some others. There's some other people who probably ought to be on the list who are not.
Martha Borsch brought to justice the number 8 on the list. Meet Pavlo Lazarenko, with a record of $200 million stolen from the good people of Ukraine.
This case was unique in two ways. It was the second time that the United States has ever prosecuted a former head of state. The first was Manuel Noriega, and in order to arrest and prosecute him, the United States had to invade Panama.
Jason Felch spent 7 months in the courtroom following the trial of Pavlo Lazarenko.
The part of it that was interesting to me was political corruption and how it works, and why was the former Prime Minister of the Ukraine in a San Francisco courtroom? Why were 12 Bay Area residents being asked to decide this man's fate?
We didn't have to invade Ukraine for that, did we? Do we even know where it is?
Not really. I heard about it, but yeah, Ukraine.
Yep, I've heard of Ukraine, yes I have.
My sister actually did a exchange program in Ukraine when she was in high school.
Well, Ukraine used to be Russia till they broke off, and now they just run around like a bunch of wild Indians in the Old West.
Traditional edge of Western Europe in sort of Cold War politics days,
What kind of leader was Mr. Lazarenko?
Pavel Lazarenko was the Prime Minister of Ukraine from 1996 to 1997.
Martha Borsch led the prosecution team during Lazarenko's trial. And yes, that is Alcatraz in the background.
Well, as I understand it, he was a Communist Party functionary who rose from a lowly tractor driver to eventually become a prime minister in his country. My name is Jonathan Howden. I was a federal prosecutor for 25 years, and I was the #2 chair on the government's trial team in the case of Lazarenko, Pavel Lazarenko. Participated in the investigation as well as the trial.
Yes, Pavel Lazarenko, one of the biggest criminals in modern history.
Estimates of the amount that he embezzled from the Ukrainian government range from 115 to around $200 billion.
Lazarenko was moving substantial amounts of his money, hundreds of millions of dollars, out of banks in Western Europe into Antigua, and some of that into the United States. Among other things, he used the money to buy this fabulous mansion up in Nevada. It has passed through the hands of law enforcement previously because at least one of its previous owners was also involved in illegal activity.
The previous owner had been convicted of wire fraud and embezzlement after stealing money to build the house.
Lazarenko's an imposing man. He's 6'3", but he definitely stands straight-backed and rigid. He looks down on everybody. He wears his power well and conveys a certain amount of authority.
My impression of him was that he was a very powerful man who was used to getting his way.
Mr. Lazarenko, despite receiving hundreds of millions of dollars into Swiss bank accounts, consistently denied that he had any business interests and denied that he had any income other than the income he was receiving as Prime Minister of Ukraine or First Vice Prime Minister of Ukraine.
Apparently he's charismatic, honest, and transparent. How did he steal the money?
There's a saying about corruption in the post-communist world that if you're going to steal, you should steal big.
Timothy Fry wrote a lot on corruption and won a prestigious award for one of his books.
I've written widely on the interaction of politics and economics in the post-communist region.
What happened in the Ukraine and a lot of the former Soviet Union after the collapse of the Soviet Union was that what had been state-run enterprises became private property and were divvied up amongst a handful of powerful people.
When the Ukraine broke off, the first thing that happened was that their poor governance, there was actually no one competent with a knowledge of economics as to how to reconstruct a nation.
Professor Latish was born in Ukraine 90 years ago and is an expert on economies in transition.
So that the budget fell, the value of the currency dropped, prices plummeted, unemployment increased terribly. Therefore, if a person knew how to screw the system, he did it. And they did so with a vengeance.
And what makes these cases so interesting is that the scale of the opportunities for theft and corruption were just on a scale that's hard to imagine in more normal times. You had a state-owned economy in which suddenly the state was no longer there to referee disputes and to protect property rights. So there just became this gold rush to strip and steal as much assets as one could get their hands on. So for the elite that were able to benefit from this process, stealing big was the way to go.
Somehow state funds got into their secret bank accounts, overseas bank accounts, and then they would flee and they would be rich in the West. Of course, Mr. Lazarenko was surprised when the U.S. District Attorney here in the Bay Area said, wait a minute, no, you're a thief.
Why was Mr. Lazarenko charged by the U.S. while others in his position were not?
Leonid Kuchma was the autocratic president of the Ukraine at the time of the trial, and Lazarenko's arrival in the United States was because Leonid Kuchma was chasing him out of the Ukraine as a political rival, as his former ally who later became a political rival.
My own view is that the law in the post-Soviet area tends to work pretty arbitrarily. American judges have independence. Among other things, they're guaranteed life tenure unless they commit some kind of abuse. You can't reduce their salaries. They can leave the bench if they want to, but they can't be put off of it except in some cases through elections. I'm a specialist on Russia and formerly on the Soviet Union. I used to work for the U.S. government, both in capacities where I was working on Soviet military affairs and also in a kind of more general function.
Professor Anderson has been teaching at UCLA for 20 years. The government agency he refers to is the CIA.
Consequently, an American judge can do what he wants. A Russian judge is an appointee, or a post-Soviet judge, a Ukrainian judge is an appointee, and he can be fired if he doesn't rule the way the government wants him to.
The United States at the time was a very close ally of Leonid Kuchma and needed Kuchma in many ways, in no small part because after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the Ukraine controlled nuclear weapons, and we needed to make sure those nuclear weapons were safe and under control.
I don't know what the motive was for starting the investigation in Ukraine. All I know is that the evidence that we uncovered and the evidence that the Swiss uncovered showed that Mr. Lazarenko was laundering huge amounts of money that he was getting from businesses in Ukraine.
What about the Americans?
There was a political interest to maintain that close tie with Leonid Kuchma, and Leonid Kuchma certainly wanted to get Lazarenko. Did that influence the ground level investigators? I never saw evidence of that. I think Brian Earl and Martha Borsch were both motivated by a dogged zeal to enforce American law and to come down on corruption, particularly when it was brought into the United States, and not let the United States become a hideaway for the world's corrupt leaders.
You don't really think he moved all that money alone. That's a lot of dough. How about a little help from your friends?
Peter Kirichenko was a businessman in Ukraine who started his own company called Agrosnabzbyt sometime around 1992, 1991.
The evidence at trial, I believe, demonstrated that it was well known, it was common knowledge that if you wanted to do business in Ukraine at that time, you had to go through Lazarenko, otherwise you couldn't do business.
So he had to go to Lazarenko and basically say, I'm trying to do business in Ukraine. As he put it, you're cutting off my oxygen. What do I need to do to be able to do business in Ukraine? And the answer from Lazarenko was, I share 50-50. I get 50% of your profits, 50% of your business.
And also, in some sense, became his partner. He was Lazarenko's window and advisor to Western business and banking practices in the beginning, and essentially educated Lazarenko and showed him the ropes and how Western banking and business operates.
And here's his next partner in crime, allegedly, of course.
Yulia Tymoshenko was in businesses similar to Kirichenko's back then in the early 90s. In the mid-90s, when Lazarenko became the first vice prime minister for energy, she and her husband, Alexander Tymoshenko, and a guy named Alexander Gravitz formed a company called United Energy Systems of Ukraine. That company was given the right to distribute natural gas in Ukraine.
He directed a disproportionate number of state contracts to import gas from Russia to United Energy Systems, and it allowed tremendous transfer of wealth to this company at the expense of the public purse.
The company was formed within weeks, if not days, of being named as one of the companies that had the right to distribute natural gas.
Well, across the globe, the oil and gas sector and the energy sector is notoriously corrupt.
You know, everybody has to survive. And humans are the most adaptable creatures you're ever going to meet. And, if somebody's got to feed their kids and it means they got to steal food to do it, then they're going to do it.
Yeah, steal big.
This position earned her the nickname the Gas Princess because she controlled the valve of natural gas from energy-rich Russia to energy-poor Ukraine, and with it, a lot of both political and economic power.
Wait a minute, gas princess? Isn't she the prime minister of Ukraine now? The one with the nice hair?
She's the extremely attractive young lady with the blonde hair.
Now we know why the man remembers.
And the plait.
UESU was supposed to distribute the Russian natural gas in Ukraine, get the money for it, and then, as it turned out, they ultimately would share half of their profits with Lazarenko. That was the deal. In exchange for getting the right to distribute, he would get half of the profits. What actually happened is that UESU would actually have another offshore shell company called UEIL receive the money rather than UESU. So the money was taken out of Ukraine, taken into London, into Cyprus, and the money from UEIL would then be used to pay Lazarenko.
Yeah, it's easy, right? It's simple. Anyone can see it. Just follow the money. Are you following? We decided to make it easy on you. Just follow the money. Don't even try to read the names on the bank. It's simple. Just follow the money. Yes, it's easy, right? It's simple. Anyone can see it. Just follow the money.
Because the money was being siphoned off by Lazarenko and Tymoshenko, Ukraine at that time, as they have today, ran up a huge gas debt to Gazprom. And by the end of 1996, they owed RAO Gazprom, which was the primary Russian supplier of natural gas, about $200 million. And so they went through the whole crisis with Russia that they've been through a number of times with respect to Ukraine's debt to Russia for the natural gas. Had the money not gone into Lazarenko's pockets, perhaps they may not have had the debt that they had at that time.
So the average citizen pays a direct cost by having to pay bribes, but also a much steeper indirect cost as the state revenue plummets and the ability of the state to provide basic social welfare for their citizens goes down.
No, this isn't something peculiar or special about Ukraine. Until the coming of J. Edgar Hoover, the U.S. government used to be intensely corrupt. What Hoover did was create an FBI which cannot be bribed. If you try to bribe an FBI man, he will agree to take the bribe. He'll film you giving it to him, and then he'll arrest you right after you've handed the money and he has the evidence. Well, there's no one in Ukraine like that, and what Ukraine needs to do is create an operation like the FBI of people who are so dedicated that they cannot be bribed.
Most of the counts relating to UASU were dismissed during the course of the trial because the judge felt that there wasn't enough evidence tying the UESU money to actions of Lazarenko directly.
So that was one of the fraud schemes that we alleged. The counts related to that scheme were dismissed by the judge mid-trial, as I understand it, because he believed that we had not proven a violation of Ukrainian law. He believed that we had not proven that Ukraine had been harmed by Lazarenko's conduct. I disagreed with that then, and I disagree with it now.
Yeah, I think the judge was tough on the prosecution, perhaps appropriately so. As is often the case in these type of trials, the prosecution alleges everything it can, and then what it actually can prove in court turns out to be a lot less. Part of the challenge that the prosecution faced in proving these things was, first of all, the legal environment at the time. The Ukrainian law at the time was in a great state of flux. So being able to prove anything was a violation of the law at a time when the rule of law didn't really exist was tenuous at best.
But one of the problems we had as a matter of proof was that, number one, Yulia Tymoshenko would not talk to us. And number two, we had some mutual legal assistance requests to the Russians because we wanted to talk to the people at RAO Gazprom that were involved, and the Russians refused to cooperate with us and refused to make the witnesses available. They actually summoned her in. She came in with her lawyer and told us that she was invoking the Ukrainian equivalent of a Fifth Amendment privilege and would not submit to an interview.
They also had to rely on Ukrainian witnesses and witnesses from all across, really, the Eastern Europe, who could testify to what happens. It wasn't enough to present, account sheets to the jury and say, here's this dollar moving to this account, moving to this account. They had to have people describe this.
A huge amount of facts to try to pull together and sort out. Obviously, we had witnesses and testimony and documents from, I think, 30 different countries. So we had all the language problems, the sort of clash of judicial systems, the difficulties of getting evidence from other countries.
San Quentin, home to California's death row. Did she serve time in there? No, definitely not. Alcatraz, maybe. Not likely. It's been closed for decades. There's the current residence of her former mentor, Pavlo Lazarenko. She's not in there either. Why not? In fact, Yulia was arrested in 2001 in Ukraine and released, then arrested again for corruption. She says it was politically motivated. Oh, those Ukrainian judges. Well, she was released again. So, can we call her an unindicted co-conspirator?
You could characterize her as an unindicted co-conspirator.
Lazarenko and Tymoshenko both ran for the same party ticket in 1998 in Ukrainian parliamentary elections. And since then, Tymoshenko has really been a major political figure in Ukraine, and as such has tried to distance herself from Lazarenko.
So it's not so much that Yulia Tymoshenko has moved from business into politics as that she has been in politics all along, and she is finally succeeding in becoming the chief politician rather than in being somebody who's persuading the politicians to help her become rich.
And there's another reason.
Several senior American political figures, including Madeleine Albright, had regular meetings with Yulia Tymoshenko, and we're closely, and we're counting on her to help the Ukraine, in its transition to democracy. So we know that the political interests of the United States government at the highest level probably didn't want Yulia Tymoshenko drawn into the Lazarenko case.
There are some sort of positives. I mean, one thing about Yulia Tymoshenko is that she knows for sure where the bodies are buried, because she buried a fair number of them herself.
So Pavel Lazarenko only became prime minister of the Ukraine because Leonid Kuchma, who came from the same region of Ukraine as he did, and elevated him to that position. Pavel Lazarenko, in turn, played a similar role with Yulia Tymoshenko, who also came from Dnipropetrovsk. When he rose to prime minister, he elevated Yulia Tymoshenko to a position of power and gave her control over Ukraine's gas monopoly.
Remember, Yannick, if in business both parties don't gain, it's not a good transaction.
So there's a very tight, close relationship between all three of these. What's interesting is that Pavel Lazarenko turns against Kuchma, and as a member of the oligarchy begins to try to wrest control of the government from Kuchma's hand. Later, after Pavel Lazarenko leaves Ukraine and is on trial in the United States, Yulia Tymoshenko plays a similar role with Kuchma. She goes from being an oligarch and a business leader with a controversial background fraught with corruption allegations to a leading member of the Orange Revolution and a woman championing the rights of the people of Ukraine against the power of the oligarchs and the government.
It was when Yulia Tymoshenko decided to join hands with the leader of the ethnic Ukrainians that the Orange Revolution succeeded.
I was thrilled by the Orange Revolution. I thought that was a very exciting time. The aftermath seemed to be somewhat of a letdown and a return to sort of business as usual.
Orange, red, green, whatever. It's always never going to be green.
But she herself had her own ambitions, and that led to a big fight between her and the leader of the ethnic Ukrainians. And the result was that his government was unable to operate effectively due to internal squabbling. And as a result, nothing really much was accomplished in terms of creating a better situation in the Ukraine.
My experience and the knowledge that I gained about Ukrainian politics over the years of investigating this case is that even if I had some opinion today about what would happen, it would be different tomorrow because things are constantly changing and alliances are constantly shifting.
Tymoshenko has been very successful in going from a figure that many people saw as engaged in shady business practices to being this new populist and defender of the Ukrainian people. It's really remarkable political transformation, and I think her winning personal style is a big reason for her success.
Actually, you know, historically, charisma has declined greatly in importance. I mean, you still have to have some. You know, the thing about Yulia Tymoshenko is this famous thing she did with her hair.
I mean, it just shows, you know, like the extent to which you can reinvent yourself, even changing your ethnicity and your language. I mean, it's all politics, it's all image, it's all very Hollywood.
In Louisiana, we have South Louisianans and North Louisianans, and you have to be one or the other. The famous Louisiana governor, Huey Long, used to tell this story about how in the South we have Catholics and in the North we have Baptists. And he would hitch the mule to the buckboard and drive his Baptist grandparents to Sunday school and his Catholic grandparents to Mass. And drive home, pick them up, take them to Mass, and drive back twice each way. Finally, somebody who was with him asked him, Governor, you know, did you really have one set of Catholic and one set of Baptist grandparents? Because it's very unusual. And the governor said, son, we didn't even have a mule, right? There was nothing true about this story. He just told it to make himself acceptable in both parts of the state. Okay, there's nothing true about Yulia Tymoshenko's image or about what she says or about what she does. She's just trying to make herself acceptable to people in both parts of Ukraine. And if you replace Russians with Baptists and Ukrainians with Catholics, you have Louisiana politics, and that's going to give you a leader who takes bribes.
If you took integrity, honesty, and a little bit of modesty, I think you'd have a pretty good recipe for a leader.
I think you have to have a certain amount of philanthropy to go into politics and be honest about it. And I think that if you view it as a way to further yourself or make money, I think you're just coming from a different place than you should be, and I think it's just fundamental.
I feel that you shouldn't follow a person or use them as a role model or anything. If you have certain doubts in your heart or mind, conscious that this person might not be telling me the right thing, I mean, but I like them. They're my star hero. I go along with that. You shouldn't do that. I think that's where we cross the line at.
You ask, what about the popcorn? Apart from eating it while you watch this movie, remember the guy who stole the money to build the house that Lazarenko bought? He fed some popcorn to a big horned sheep in a national park, shot it at close range, then mounted it on his wall. Well, we thought it would be a cool image.
So these people think that they can recreate themselves. But can they really in the modern world? Actually, when information is at everyone's fingertips? I don't think so. I mean, I don't think that these oligarchs are really going to succeed in recreating themselves, because the past is always there to haunt them, and it's all on the internet. That's the wonderful thing about it.
Mohamed Suharto, Philippines. Placed under house arrest, but never stood trial. Jean-Claude Duvalier of Haiti. Lost most of it in divorce. He vows to run for office again. He needs the money. Alberto Fujimori of Peru. Currently serving time. His daughter intends to run for president and issue a pardon to her father. Mobutu Sese Seko. Never charged with any crime. Ferdinand Marcos went into exile in Hawaii. His wife Imelda stood trial for corruption, but was acquitted. They needed the money to buy all those shoes. Pablo Lazarenko, serving time. recently ran for public office in Ukraine from his jail. Yulia Tymoshenko is an example of a modern politician who got rich at the expense of the common people and has reinvented herself as a people's candidate of the present. Why in the contemporary world has the word reputation lost its meaning? Why are people with shady pasts making a successful career and rising to the top of the political Olympus? The result of it? We have seen many times the rise of more and more corrupt states. So why do we continue to follow the bad leaders? Why do we eat that political popcorn?
My name is Frances Bates. I'm a homemaker, and we live in New York.
I'm Peter Bates. I'm retired. I live in New York. I was a marketing exec.
My name is Mikkel Shamim. I'm a first-year grad student of economics.
Don Gordon, retired basketball player.
My nickname is Ayat Gamboa, or my name is John Gamboa.
Yeah, my name is Scott Reed, and I'm in the waste management business.
My name is Robert Wilkins, and I'm currently, my last line of work was environmental services, and I'm a disabled person at this time.
My name is Erin Fair, and I am the Advocacy Director for the Green Alliance of Patients and Providers.
My name is Erica Young, and I work for a property management company.
So my name is Sach Constantine. I actually work in renewable energy. I work just across the street here at the California Public Utilities Commission.